Nobody saw this coming, and if you think you've seen Messi before, this right here just rewrote the rules. Late last night, a grainy 3-minute clip began circulating online, allegedly leaked by someone very close to 50 Cent himself. Not a random insider, not a studio executive, his own personal assistant. And what's inside that clip? Let's just say, it has the entire hip-hop world holding its breath. The footage, reportedly taken from an unreleased documentary tied to 50's inner circle, doesn't just hint at drama. It explodes with it, names are dropped, private conversations are exposed, and more than 10 major rappers are allegedly caught in situations they never wanted the public to see. Fans are shocked, industry insiders are scrambling, and those 3 minutes? They feel like a warning shot before something much bigger. But here's where it gets even more intense. Sources claim this wasn't an accident. No hacked server. No random leak. This was deliberate, calculated, and possibly revenge, because behind the scenes, emotions ran high. Tensions had been building for months. Quiet rivalries, broken alliances, deals gone wrong, and now, everything is starting to spill out in the most public way possible. You have to ask yourself, why now? Why would someone from inside 50 Cent's camp risk everything to release something this explosive? And more importantly, who exactly is being exposed in those unseen 7 minutes that didn't leak? Because if this is just a preview, then what's coming next could shake the entire industry. Stay with me, because once we break down what was actually said in that footage, you might start looking at some of your favorite artists very differently. The moment that clip hit the internet, everything changed, and if you were watching closely, you could almost feel the shift before anyone even said a word, because people inside the industry knew this was not just another rumor, this was something different, something heavier, something that carried weight. And the first thing that stood out was how calm 50 Cent looked in that footage, almost too calm. Like a man who already knew what was coming next, like someone who had been sitting on secrets for a long time waiting for the right moment to let them breathe. And the assistant, the one everyone is now whispering about, was never supposed to be part of the story, but somehow became the center of it, because sources say that assistant had been around for years, seen everything, heard everything, watched deals happen behind closed doors, watched friendships fall apart over money, loyalty, and pride. And what people are now realizing is that those 3 minutes were not random clips stitched together, they were carefully selected moments, pieces of conversations that hinted at something deeper, something that fans were never meant to hear. And as the video spread across social media, reactions came fast. Fans are shocked, some refused to believe it, others started connecting dots from years of interviews, old posts, and subtle disses that suddenly made a lot more sense. And then came the first name drop, not directly but enough for people to figure it out, a voice in the background, tense, almost defensive, saying this was supposed to stay between us. And that line alone sent the internet into chaos, because now it was clear this was not staged, this was not scripted, this was real emotion caught at the wrong time. And emotions ran high, not just among fans but within the circles of those who might be involved, because reports started coming in that phones were blowing up, managers calling, lawyers trying to understand what exactly had been leaked, and more importantly what had not. And that is when things took an even more unexpected turn, because another part of the clip showed a heated discussion, voices overlapping, accusations flying, and one person clearly frustrated saying, "You think I will take the fall for all of this?" And that single sentence changed the entire narrative, because now it was not just about exposure, it was about blame, about someone feeling cornered, someone feeling like they had been set up. And if you listen closely, you could hear 50 Cent in the background, not yelling, not arguing, just watching, and that silence spoke louder than anything else, because it suggested control, it suggested awareness. And fans started asking the same question, was he behind this, or was he just letting it happen? And while that debate continued, more details began to surface about the assistant, the one accused of leaking everything. People described them as quiet, observant, always in the background, never drawing attention but always present. And those are often the people who know the most, the ones who see without being seen. And according to insiders, there had been tension building between that assistant and members of the team, disagreements over loyalty, over respect, over how far things should go. And some say it reached a breaking point just days before the leak, an argument behind closed doors, voices raised, doors slammed, and after that something shifted, because the assistant reportedly stopped showing up, stopped answering calls, and then suddenly the clip appeared online almost like a message. And as fans replayed those 3 minutes over and over, trying to catch every word, every hint, every hidden meaning, one thing became clear: this was only the beginning, because even within that short footage there were references to meetings that had not been shown, to conversations that had been cut, into names that were only partially revealed, and that left everyone wondering what else is out there, what else has been been recorded, what else could come out next, and the industry started to feel uneasy because this was not just gossip anymore, this was something that could affect reputations, relationships, even careers, and the reactions from other artists were telling. Some stayed completely silent, which in itself raised suspicion. Others posted vague messages about loyalty, trust, and betrayal without naming anyone, but the timing was too perfect to ignore, and fans began to take sides even without knowing the full story, some defending their favorite artists, others calling for more information, demanding transparency. And in the middle of all this chaos, one thing stood out: the absence of any direct response from 50 Cent. No statement, no denial, no clarification, just silence, and that silence started to feel intentional, like a strategy, like he was letting the story grow on its own, watching how people react, who speaks up, who stays quiet. And that kind of silence can be powerful because it creates space for speculation, for tension, for drama to build, and that is exactly what happened. As hours turned into a full day, the clip continued to trend, discussions became more intense, theories more detailed, and then a new rumor began to circulate that the leaked footage was only a fraction of a much larger documentary, one that reportedly dives deep into the inner workings of the industry, the relationships, the conflicts, the moments that never make it to the public. And if that is true, then those 3 minutes were just a glimpse, just enough to spark curiosity, just enough to create pressure. And if there is more footage out there, and all signs suggest there is, then the real question is not what we have already seen, but what we have not, and who might be affected when it finally comes out. Because if these first 3 minutes were enough to shake the entire conversation, then whatever comes next could change everything, and right now no one seems ready for that. Not the fans, not the artists, and definitely not the ones who know their names might be next to surface. As the day turned into night, the conversation only intensified. Social media was flooded with clips, screenshots, transcripts, and speculation, and everyone was trying to piece together the puzzle, because the leak did more than just expose private moments. It painted a picture of tension, loyalty, and betrayal that fans had never imagined existed in hip-hop, and insiders say that tension had been simmering for years. Behind the glitz and glamour, behind the red carpets and flashy deals, there were cracks forming, cracks that no one wanted to acknowledge until they finally became impossible to ignore. And one of the most shocking revelations from the leaked clip was how candid some of the artists were in their private moments. Voices raised, frustrations aired, disputes discussed openly, and suddenly fans were realizing that what they had always thought was performance or image was only part of the story, because behind closed doors people argued, fought over business deals, over respect, over perceived slights. And that part of the footage showed 50 Cent himself confronting one of his longtime collaborators about loyalty and choices made in secrecy. The conversation started calmly but quickly escalated, the tension so thick you could almost feel it through the screen. Words were sharp, accusations flew, and at one point a voice shouted, "How could you even think I would betray you?" And the assistant caught it all, recording every moment carefully, capturing the energy, the emotions, the unspoken threats. And that clip alone became a point of reference for fans, analyzing every reaction, every facial expression, every pause. And as the night continued, rumors began to swirl about who exactly was caught off guard in the footage. Insiders hinted at surprise appearances and moments of vulnerability that could have major consequences for reputations, careers, and even friendships. And the emotional fallout was immediate. Some artists reportedly refused to speak to each other for days. Managers scrambled to contain damage control, lawyers were consulted, and the industry was left asking themselves how one 3-minute clip could unravel months or years of carefully constructed images and personas. But it wasn't just the industry reacting. Fans were equally invested, dissecting every frame, posting theories, tagging names, demanding context, and calling out behavior that had never been seen publicly, and that created a ripple effect, because now everyone had to consider the possibility that nothing was private, nothing was safe, nothing was untouchable. And then came the part that really changed everything, when one of the more well-known rappers was shown in an unexpected confrontation, an argument over money, over credit, over influence. And the way the voice cracked, the way the body language shifted, all of it suggested deeper divisions than anyone had imagined. Fans were shocked, some were defensive, others were relentless in pointing out inconsistencies, and that only fueled the fire of speculation. And as more people chimed in, the story began to take on a life of its own, because this was no longer just a leak, this was a cultural moment, a tipping point where loyalty, reputation, and personal integrity collided in ways that had never been publicly documented before. And insiders claimed that during the clip, one artist whispered something almost inaudible, something that hinted at a betrayal so personal it could end friendships permanently. And that revelation sent shockwaves, because now people started connecting dots across past interviews, old social media posts, and private messages. Suddenly lines that had seemed meaningless took on new significance, and the emotions escalated even further when the footage revealed 50 Cent engaging in a private discussion about deals with some of the biggest names in the industry, debating who was trustworthy, who was ambitious, who was willing to cross lines for success. And the assistant's camera captured every nuance, every pause, every subtle shift in tone, making it impossible for viewers to ignore the underlying tension and power plays. And then the clip showed a confrontation where accusations flew about, secrets shared in confidence, one voice raising the stakes, threatening legal action, the other trying to defend themselves, and all the while 50 Cent remained silent. his gaze intense, watching and calculating, creating a tension that made viewers feel like they were intruding on something forbidden and personal, and that silence, combined with the revelations, made fans question everything they thought they knew about the relationships within the industry, because suddenly nothing was predictable. Alliances were fragile, and reputations could change overnight, and as the night deepened, more commentary poured in from insiders who confirmed the authenticity of some of the interactions and hinted at moments that were too sensitive even to show publicly, and that only made the audience hunger for more, knowing that this was just the tip of the iceberg, that the real story, the full uncut version, could hold revelations that might rewrite histories, reputations, and fan perceptions completely. And with each repost, each new analysis, each whispered speculation, the drama grew exponentially, and the assistant, once a background figure, became a central character in a narrative that fans could not stop following, because they were witnessing not only private conversations but human emotions in their rawest form: fear, anger, pride, loyalty, betrayal, and ambition, all colliding in a way that made the industry feel more fragile than it had ever seemed. And insiders say that some of the reactions in the clip were so intense that they left some of the artists visibly shaken, questioning who they could trust and what consequences might follow. And as the leak continued to dominate conversation across social media, the ramifications were becoming impossible to ignore, because the clip had set off a chain reaction, raising questions about power, control, secrecy, and the very nature of celebrity in an industry built on image and perception. The tension didn't stop there, because as the days went on, new layers of the story began to surface. Insiders revealed that the assistant had access to not just conversations but private meetings, recordings of studio sessions, and even casual interactions that revealed unguarded truths and unspoken resentments. And what made it more explosive was how the clip highlighted fractures that had been quietly growing for years between artists who publicly appeared united but privately were constantly negotiating alliances, trust, and influence. And one moment in the footage sent fans into a frenzy: a heated argument over an unreleased track where voices escalated, accusations flew, and the energy in the room was almost tangible. Through the screen, a voice shouted, "I trusted you with everything," and the reply was cold, calculated, and sharp, saying, "Maybe you shouldn't have." And that exchange became the talk of the industry, because it seemed to confirm long-standing rumors that some of the biggest names were willing to betray those closest to them for personal gain. And while the debate raged online, insiders claimed that the assistant's motive wasn't just chaos, it was to expose the reality behind the curated images, the facades of loyalty and brotherhood that the public had been sold for years. And every frame of that 3-minute clip seemed to support that theory, because the body language, the tone, and the subtle expressions of discomfort and surprise suggested that many were caught completely off guard, and that led to a ripple effect as managers scrambled to contain potential fallout. Deals were reassessed, friendships reevaluated, and the quiet tension that had been simmering beneath the surface now erupted into full-blown concern and paranoia. And then came a particularly dramatic scene where 50 Cent was shown addressing someone about trust and the consequences of crossing lines, and the words were calm but loaded with meaning, almost a warning, and fans immediately speculated about whether this was foreshadowing future conflicts in the industry and who would be impacted next. And as the drama unfolded, one of the most shocking elements revealed was the vulnerability of some of the rappers who had previously been portrayed as untouchable or fearless in public settings. In the private footage, they were questioning decisions, defending actions, justifying choices, and at times even showing signs of fear and doubt. And that contrast with their public persona made the leak feel even more explosive, because it humanized these larger-than-life figures and exposed the reality behind the performances that fans had idolized for years. And social media reacted instantly, with clips dissected frame by frame, people posting screenshots, analyzing expressions, sharing theories about motives, and the assistant became an unexpected hero for some while a villain for others. And then there was the part that hinted at alliances and rivalries that had not been publicly acknowledged: a whispered comment, a glance exchanged, a subtle tone that implied years of tension, unresolved disputes, and potential betrayals. And fans began speculating which artists were secretly aligned, which were on shaky ground, and which might be about to experience a public fallout. And as conversations escalated, insiders confirmed that some of the confrontations were about contracts, money splits, and creative control, and that even some long-standing collaborations were suddenly under scrutiny, as fans questioned how much of what they had seen in music releases and public appearances was orchestrated for image rather than genuine camaraderie. And then came the part that truly shocked everyone: a private exchange caught on camera where two major artists discussed sensitive information about others in the circle, and the way they laughed about it, the casual tone, contrasted sharply with the seriousness of what was being shared. And that juxtaposition created waves online, because fans felt they were seeing unfiltered reality, the parts of the music world that had been shielded from public view. And insiders claimed that this moment alone would be remembered as one of the most revealing of the decade, because it encapsulated secrecy, loyalty, betrayal, and raw ambition all in a single interaction, and the fallout was immediate. Some artists allegedly reached out to others to address concerns. Rumors circulated about potential legal action attempts to prevent further leaks, and the assistant became the focal point of both admiration and criticism, depending on which side of the narrative people were on. And as the clip continued to dominate online discourse, the questions kept multiplying. Who else was caught off guard? Who would step up to clarify their side? Who would remain silent? And what would be the long-term consequences of this unprecedented exposure? And the longer the footage stayed in public view, the more people realized that this wasn't just a scandal, it was a glimpse into a world where trust is fragile, reputations are currency, and every interaction can have consequences far beyond what anyone could have imagined. And with every replay, every analysis, every whispered theory, the story deepened. Fans became more invested, more speculative, and the assistant, once invisible, became central to a narrative that promised to redefine relationships, alliances, and perceptions in hip-hop forever. And as night fell again, conversations continued. The industry buzzed with anxiety and anticipation, in the sense that what had started as a 3-minute leak was only the beginning of something much bigger and more consequential than anyone had predicted. And just when it seemed like the chaos might settle, something new erupted. Insiders revealed that the assistant had been documenting more than just conversations. They had access to raw footage from studio sessions, meetings, and private gatherings where unguarded emotions spilled over, and suddenly what had been a 3-minute clip felt like a preview of an entire hidden world. Fans were shocked to realize how much went unseen, how many dynamics had been quietly shaping the industry behind closed doors. And one particularly tense moment in the leaked footage showed 50 Cent confronting a group of collaborators about loyalty, accountability, and the consequences of hidden agendas. The voices rose, emotions ran high, and the arguments became almost palpable through the screen. And what struck fans most was the calculated way he navigated the tension, calm yet commanding, watching reactions, carefully gauging responses, almost as if he were orchestrating the unfolding drama without saying a word. And the assistant captured every nuance, every pause, every glance, and that documentation sparked a new level of speculation, because people began to wonder if this was part of a larger plan, a way to test loyalty, reveal alliances, or even expose weaknesses that had been ignored for too long. And the reactions from other artists were immediate. Some publicly distanced themselves, others remained silent, fueling rumors, while insiders claimed that private conversations were happening. Non-stop calls, messages, and meetings to figure out how to handle what had just surfaced. And then came another shocking moment. Fans couldn't stop talking about an argument over money splits and credit for upcoming projects. Voices rose, accusations were thrown, and for a moment even 50 Cent appeared frustrated but controlled the situation, the weight of his presence making every other voice pause. And the assistant's footage captured it all, giving fans a front row seat to the kind of behind-the-scenes confrontations that rarely see the light of day. And what made it even more intense was how personal the disputes had become. A whisper about betrayal, a glance of disbelief, a tone of anger, and suddenly it wasn't just about business, it was about trust, friendship, and long-held grudges. And the internet exploded, dissecting each interaction, every word, every subtle gesture, and fans began to debate endlessly about who had crossed lines, who was being strategic, and who might be in trouble next. And then came a part of the clip that suggested secret alliances were shifting, plans were being reconsidered, and relationships were being evaluated in real time. The way some voices hesitated, the way others tried to mediate, revealed tensions that had been hidden beneath the surface for years. And insiders confirmed that some of the confrontations had been simmering for months, even years. Unresolved disputes over creative direction, loyalty, and influence. And the assistant, who had been silently observing, seemed to be at the center of it all, capturing moments that could change perceptions forever. And as the clip continued to trend online, fans noticed subtle but powerful exchanges that hinted at future fallout. One whisper, one look, one pause could mean the difference between an alliance remaining intact or collapsing entirely. And the emotions were raw. Some artists appeared defensive, others apologetic, and some simply silent. But the atmosphere was tense enough to suggest that even those who appeared calm were processing the impact of what had been revealed. And rumors began to spread that additional footage existed, more extensive, more revealing, and that if released could bring entire networks of artists, managers, and collaborators under intense scrutiny. And the thought of what might be exposed next only heightened the tension, with fans speculating wildly, every new post, every leaked snippet fueling the narrative. And as the hours passed, insiders reported that some of the biggest names in hip-hop were scrambling to assess damage control, arranging meetings to address the fallout, and attempting to verify what the assistant had captured. And then came one of the most dramatic revelations from the footage, a private confrontation that had never been rumored, a dispute over influence, recognition, and loyalty that escalated so quickly that voices could be heard almost shouting over each other. The raw emotions stunned viewers, because it showed that even those at the top of the game were vulnerable to mistrust, miscommunication, and personal conflict, and the assistant's recordings revealed not just words but body language, subtle expressions, pauses, and inflections that made the situation feel real, immediate, and unavoidable. And as fans replayed the footage endlessly, analyzing every frame, the discussion spread across platforms. Influencers and commentators dissected every interaction. Debate raged about intent, consequences, and possible next moves, and insiders hinted that what had leaked was only a fraction of a much larger story, one that could redefine the public's understanding of relationships, hierarchy, and power dynamics in the industry. And as that realization sank in, it became clear to everyone watching that the 3-minute leak was no accident, no trivial event. It was the spark that had ignited a powder keg, and what came next could forever change the narrative for everyone involved, leaving fans, insiders, and artists alike waiting with bated breath to see who would emerge unscathed and who would be exposed further. And just when people thought the storm might settle, new revelations emerged that made everything even more intense. Insiders claimed that the assistant had access to private calls, behind-the-scenes negotiations, and even off-the-record interviews where tensions boiled over and trust was tested in ways no one outside the inner circle had ever witnessed. And the footage captured moments that were raw, unfiltered, and devastatingly candid, with emotions running high, voices trembling, and at times even silence speaking louder than words, because in some exchanges the pauses, the glances, and the body language conveyed fear, anger, and betrayal all at once. And one particularly explosive segment showed 50 Cent confronting a well-known artist about loyalty and the choices they had made behind closed doors. The words were precise but heavy with implication. Every sentence weighed on the room like a loaded gun, and the tension escalated as accusations flew, voices overlapped, and the atmosphere was electric with suspense. And for fans watching, it was impossible not to feel the gravity of the situation as they saw their favorite artists in vulnerable, unguarded moments that humanized them in ways the public had never imagined. And as the discussion continued, insiders reported that multiple long-standing relationships were being questioned, private partnerships reassessed, and even some business deals paused as a direct result of the leak, because the footage made clear that behind the public personas, there were fractures, grudges, and secrets that had festered unnoticed for years. And then came the part that sent shockwaves throughout the community: a whispered comment about betrayal, a tense look exchanged between two collaborators, and a sudden revelation about hidden agendas that hinted at consequences far beyond what anyone could have predicted. Fans erupted online, dissecting every frame, theorizing motives, and debating who was truly innocent and who had been playing a double game. And what made this even more dramatic was the calculated way 50 Cent navigated the storm, calm but commanding, observing every reaction, making subtle interventions, and letting the drama unfold in a way that suggested control and awareness at a level no one had anticipated. And the assistant captured it all, documenting not just conversations but subtle dynamics, tensions, and alliances that had previously been invisible to the public eye, creating a narrative that was impossible to ignore. And then came the segment that revealed deep personal conflicts between artists, some voices shaking with emotion, others defensive and aggressive, arguing over perceived slights, stolen credit, and miscommunication that had built up over months or even years. And the intensity of these moments made fans realize that behind the music, the image, and the fame, there were very real human struggles with trust, respect, and power. And the ripple effect was immediate. Insiders reported that some artists were reaching out to their teams frantically, others were calling each other to clarify statements and intentions, and the industry as a whole felt the pressure of exposure, because suddenly the private world they had taken for granted was no longer private. And then came the part that truly captured the public's attention: a confrontation over financial arrangements and creative control, where voices escalated into shouting. Accusations flew like sparks, and for a moment even 50 Cent seemed to allow the situation to play out without intervention, letting the raw emotions speak for themselves. And the impact was immediate. Fans speculated endlessly about who had been betrayed, who was manipulating whom, and who would be forced to answer for their actions. And insiders hinted that these interactions could have long-term consequences, potentially altering alliances, collaborations, and reputations across the industry. And the assistant, once a background figure, became a pivotal character in the story, the one who captured the unfiltered truth and delivered it to the public in a way that no press release or controlled statement ever could. And as the days went on, the speculation intensified, theories multiplied, and the anticipation of what other footage might exist created an atmosphere of suspense that left fans and insiders alike waiting with bated breath for the next reveal. And every new clip, screenshot, or hint only fueled the narrative of betrayal, power struggles, loyalty tests, and personal conflicts, showing that in this world even the smallest slip could have massive consequences. And with each replay of the leaked footage, more details emerged, more questions arose, and more drama unfolded, proving that what began as a simple leak had evolved into a story with endless layers, raw emotions, and stakes that were higher than anyone had imagined. And just when it felt like the story couldn't get any bigger, the next layer of chaos emerged. Insiders revealed that the assistant had not only captured private arguments but also sensitive discussions about upcoming releases, collaborations, and behind-the-scenes strategies that could change how the industry operated for months if not years. And the footage showed artists in moments of unguarded honesty, some expressing regret, others frustration, and a few clearly questioning alliances that had seemed solid until now. The tension was palpable, voices raised over creative decisions, financial splits, and personal loyalty, and the way 50 Cent handled each confrontation was a study in control, calm yet assertive, observing, waiting, and letting the drama unfold on its own. And the assistant captured it all, every gesture, every subtle glance, every hesitation, creating a record that fans would dissect endlessly for hidden meanings and clues. And then came the scene that sent social media into a frenzy, a heated exchange over recognition and influence where accusations were sharp, tempers flared, and at one point a voice shouted about betrayal and manipulation, and the reaction from the room was electric because even those involved seemed stunned by the intensity and authenticity of the confrontation. Fans replayed the moment over and over, analyzing expressions, tone, and body language, trying to decipher who was telling the truth and who was hiding something. And insiders claimed that the impact of this clip would ripple far beyond the initial leak because it exposed vulnerabilities, fractured alliances, and revealed how fragile trust really was in the world of high-profile music and relationships. And then came another dramatic twist. The assistant recorded a private moment where two major artists discussed sensitive information about others in the circle. The way they laughed, shrugged, and casually referenced incidents that had never been public created shockwaves, because it showed that even the most carefully guarded reputations could be compromised in an instant. And the reactions were immediate. Some artists were reportedly furious, others defensive, and managers scrambled to assess the fallout and control the narrative, while fans speculated wildly about motives, hidden agendas, and potential consequences. And then the footage revealed more personal confrontations where long-standing grudges surfaced, unspoken tensions boiled over, and the emotions were raw and unfiltered, the kind of drama that can't be staged or scripted. And fans were captivated not just by the conflict but by the insight into the human side of their favorite artists, the ones who often appear untouchable, confident, and unshakable but in private reveal doubt, fear, and frustration. And insiders confirmed that several private meetings captured in the footage had never been publicly documented, conversations about strategy, loyalty, and trust that had now become public, and that alone was enough to shake the industry because it forced everyone involved to reconsider alliances, relationships, and even future plans. And then came the revelation that many of the conflicts were tied not just to business but to personal relationships, emotions that had been simmering for months, sometimes years. And in some cases the assistant's recordings caught moments of confrontation that had escalated into near shouting matches where respect, pride, and influence were all at stake, and the tension was so thick it was almost tangible through the screen. Fans could feel the weight of every accusation, every pause, every subtle shift in tone, and insiders claimed that the fallout from these moments would be felt for a long time as trust was reassessed, partnerships reconsidered, and reputations carefully examined. And what made it even more explosive was that the assistant, once a background figure, had now become central to the narrative, controlling the flow of information, documenting moments that could alter careers, and giving fans an unprecedented look into the inner workings of the industry. And as the clip continued to circulate, speculation intensified, questions multiplied, and anticipation built for what additional footage might exist, what secrets remained undiscovered, and who would be exposed next, proving that this leak was not just a momentary scandal but the beginning of a long, dramatic saga with stakes higher than anyone had imagined. And as fans and insiders waited with bated breath, it became clear that the assistant had changed everything, and no one would ever view loyalty, trust, or influence in the same way again. And as the storm raged on, more shocking details emerged. Insiders claimed the assistant had compiled hours of footage showing private conflicts, candid admissions, and behind-the-scenes confrontations that went far beyond what fans had already seen. The intensity of the emotions was palpable, voices trembling with frustration, anger, and disbelief, and in some moments even fear. And the most striking footage showed 50 Cent in private discussions with multiple artists debating loyalty, trust, and creative control, his tone calm but loaded with meaning, every sentence measured, every pause deliberate, creating an atmosphere thick with tension and anticipation. And the assistant's recordings captured not only the words but the subtleties, the gestures, the glances, the hesitations, that revealed just how high the stakes were. And then came a sequence that left fans speechless, a heated argument over collaboration credits where voices escalated, accusations flew, and at one point someone shouted, "I trusted you with everything," and the reply was sharp and cold, saying maybe you shouldn't have. And the rawness of that exchange sent shockwaves through social media, fans dissecting each frame, analyzing expressions, body language, and tone, trying to understand who was telling the truth and who was being strategic. And insiders confirmed that these confrontations were about far more than music. They were about respect, ambition, loyalty, and perceived betrayals that had been building for years, and as speculation grew, so did the impact on the industry. Some artists reportedly reassessed partnerships, others called meetings to address internal conflicts, and even deals in motion were reportedly put on hold because the footage exposed tensions that no one could ignore. And then came another bombshell: a private exchange captured between two major artists laughing about secrets and discussing sensitive information about others in the circle, casual yet loaded with implication. This moment highlighted the vulnerability of everyone involved, and fans couldn't get enough dissecting every word, every gesture, and theorizing about potential consequences. And the assistant, once invisible, had now become central to the story, documenting moments that could shift perceptions and alter relationships forever. And the tension escalated further when additional footage showed arguments over money, influence, and decision-making, authority voices raised, accusations thrown. And for the first time, some artists appeared genuinely shaken by what they had said and done in private. And as fans replayed these moments repeatedly, analyzing every frame, it became clear that the leak was more than a scandal. It was a revelation about the fragility of trust, the complexity of alliances, and the raw humanity behind the carefully curated public images of some of the biggest names in the industry. And insiders hinted that this was only the beginning, that much more footage existed, some of it even more explosive, threatening to expose secrets, betrayals, and conflicts that could have lasting consequences for careers, reputations, and relationships. And as anticipation built, the assistant's role grew increasingly pivotal, controlling the narrative, capturing truths, and holding power in a way that no one had anticipated. And every replay, every analysis, every whispered rumor added layers to the story, proving that what began as a 3-minute leak had evolved into an ongoing saga, one that would continue to captivate, shock, and unsettle fans and insiders alike, leaving everyone wondering who would be exposed next, how alliances would shift, and what the ultimate fallout would be. And finally, as the days stretched on and every new clip, screenshot, and whispered rumor made its way online, it became clear that this was far from over. The assistant's leak had not only exposed secrets but had changed the way fans, insiders, and even artists themselves viewed loyalty, trust, and power in the industry. Every interaction caught on camera, every raised voice, every subtle glance created a ripple effect that reached far beyond what anyone could have imagined, and the reactions kept escalating. Some artists attempted to clarify, others doubled down in silence, while fans dissected, debated, and speculated endlessly, creating a constant storm of commentary that showed just how invested everyone had become. And the tension, the drama, and the revelations left more questions than answers. Who else was being exposed in the unseen footage? Which relationships would survive and which alliances would crumble? And what other secrets were waiting to surface? Were questions that kept the industry and fans alike on edge. And as you watch this, think about everything that was revealed in just 3 minutes of footage: the emotions, betrayals, and unguarded moments that no one expected to see. It's impossible to ignore the implications of what might still be hidden, and that is why you need to stay tuned, because the story is still unfolding, and every move, every reaction, and every new leak could change the narrative entirely. So here's what you need to do: make sure you hit that like button. If you want more updates, dive into the comments and tell us what you think. Who shocked you the most? Who do you trust? And who do you think might be hiding something? Because your voice matters. Join the conversation, subscribe so you don't miss the next explosive reveal, and turn on notifications, because this saga is far from over and you need to be front and center when the next layer of drama drops. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single second of what comes next.